Hello, smart scholars. Welcome to another section of the endocrine system. Today, we're going to be looking at the menstrual cycle. By way of definition, what is the menstrual cycle? The menstrual cycle is a process or a series of events that happens in a continuous pattern and is exclusively for females. Now, I'll take it again. The menstrual cycle is a process or a series of events that happens in a continuous pattern and is exclusively to the females. Now, what are the hormones that power the menstrual cycle? We have progesterone, we have estrogen, and we have the gonadotropins. By way of recap, remember, the gonadotropins are hormones that are secreted by the anterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary is made up of two lobes. You have the posterior and the anterior lobe. The anterior pituitary secretes gonadotropins that act on the gonads. For the females, the gonads are the ovaries, and the male, the testes. So now, what are the gonadotropins? The gonadotropins are these hormones: luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. So these are the hormones, major hormones that play a role in the menstrual cycle. Now, what are the reproductive organs that we're looking at when we are talking about the menstrual cycle? We have the ovary and we have the uterus. Now, the menstrual cycle is divided into phases. For the ovary, you have the proliferative phase and you have the luteal phase. Now, for the uterus, we have the shedding phase, the proliferative phase, and the secretory phase. So in the uterus, you have three phases: the shedding phase, which corresponds to day 1. We have the proliferative phase, and we have the secretory phase. So I'll just write that down here. You have the shedding, you have the proliferative, and you have the secretory phase. Now, what happens in the ovary? The ovary, all right, has follicles. Now, when we'll be looking at the ovarian cycle, you will see that as the ovaries develop, it gets to a point where you have the secondary oocyte. As the stage of ovarian development, the secondary oocyte is the point where you have these gonadotropins acting on it. That means they are responsive to the gonadotropins, the follicle stimulating hormone, and the luteinizing hormones. Now, the ovary is made up of the granulosa cell and the theca cells. The granulosa cells, all right, produce FSH and also produce estrogen. Now, the thecal cells, all right, secrete androgens at a certain level. Now, what happens is that these androgens, all right, are triggered by the concentration of, all right, follicle stimulating hormone acting on the granulosa cells. Now, the granulosa cells contains this enzyme aromatase. Now, when the thecal cells, all right, secrete the androgens, they move to the granulosa compartment of the ovary, where they, all right, are converted to the estradiol. Now, let's go back to the menstrual cycle. In the uterus, we have the shedding, the proliferative, and the secretory phase, and these are powered by different hormones. Now, the shedding phase is day 1. And what happens here? At this point, there is the bleeding. It's characterized by bleeding, and it's characterized by progesterone withdrawal. Now, this occurs, all right, between 1 to 5 days, and it varies, okay, amongst females. So the shedding phase, all right, is also called the bleeding phase, and it's characterized by, all right, shedding of blood, the loss of blood from the endometrial component of the uterus. So we look at the uterus, this is the endometrial lining. So when this is shed as a result of the arteries, okay, becoming the arteries becoming dead, something happens, they shed the blood, and we see it, all right, expelled. Now, the next phase is the proliferative phase, all right, and this is powered by estrogen and follicle stimulating hormone, just like we have in the ovary, okay, the proliferative phase where you have the synthesis of the follicles powered by the follicle stimulating hormone and estrogen. Now, in the proliferative phase, this is more like a regenerative phase where the cells that were dead, the tissues that were dead, all right, are synthesized and they begin to grow, particularly the arteries that were furnishing the uterus with the blood. So we see that at this point, all right, it's powered by what? Estrogen, powered by the follicle stimulating hormone, more like a regenerative stage. Now we go on to the secretory phase. Before we get to the secretory phase, all right, we already would have the ovulation occurring at the mid-cycle. So now, by way of emphasis, let's take it that this particular woman has a cycle length of 28 days. So you have day 1, and then you have day 28. So the day 1, you have the shedding, all right, or the bleeding phase or the menstrual phase. And then in the mid-cycle, all right, you have a high concentration of estrogen leading to the result of, all right, LH spike, or what we call LH surge. So when you have the LH surge, the most mature, all right, egg in the ovary is released. And when this is released, this is called ovulation. And this occurs at the mid-cycle, okay? So when this happens at the spike of LH coming from the result of, all right, the release from the ovaries, when this happens, something happens to the uterus, all right? The egg that is released, all right, comes down, all right, and then we have the ovary being converted to what? Corpus luteum. Once you have the formation of the corpus luteum, progesterone is, all right, produced and secreted at this point. Now, progesterone now prepares the uterus for the pregnancy, maintains the stability of the uterus, and this is called the secretory phase, all right? And then in the ovary, it's called the luteal phase. Predominantly, the secretory phase and the luteal phase, all right, are powered by what? Progesterone. So when this happens, all right, the uterus, all right, becomes, all right, prepared and, all right, for implantation. Now, after which, something happens to the cervix, all right? The cervix, all right, begins to, at this point, for the action of progesterone, becomes mucoid to prevent, all right, the infiltration of bacteria or any other substance. So now, by way of recap, let's look at it again. We have the shedding phase, we have the proliferative phase, and we have the secretory phase. So that's all for now. Please take note, these are the 3 phases that happens during the menstrual cycle, and then for the in the ovary, we have the proliferative, and we also have the luteal phase, powered by specific hormones. For the proliferative phase, we have estrogen, all right, we have follicle stimulating hormone. For the secretory phase, we have, okay, we have the hormone progesterone. So that's all for now. Make sure you drop your comments in the comment section, and please subscribe to this channel. Bye-bye.